22nd, 1995. I am Ellie Gooch. I am at the Public Library with Elmerline Vancore. Seems quite appropriate that we meet here in the library, Elmerline, inasmuch as you were a librarian, and that's what we want to talk about, is the Colebrook Public Library when you were a librarian. I know you didn't and I didn't grow up in Colebrook, so we really don't remember too much about the library in the early, when we were kids. But when you moved to Colebrook, when you married, who was librarian?
Martha French was librarian.
She was librarian. You knew that she was my great aunt, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
You'd heard that. And she was librarian from 1925 to 1955. She's also Nancy Dodge's great-grandmother. Nancy Dodge has written the book on the history of the cemeteries, which is very beneficial to the area. Mrs. French got done in 1955, and then did Edith Jackson come in then?
Yes, she was librarian from 1955 to 1962, and I came on after.
You came on in 1962.
Right.
And how long were you librarian?
From 1962 to 1971, 9 years.
9 years.
Yes.
Well, I think it would be okay for me to say I think Mrs. French and Mrs. Jackson, they ran quite a tight ship in the library. You know, it was pretty quiet. We had to whisper and things like that. But they did a very, very good job, and they really had little to work with.
Very little.
I believe you said when you became librarian that Mrs. Jackson was so wonderful to you.
Oh, she was wonderful to me. She helped me in any way she could, and she substituted for me. But not only that, she was always there for me when I was learning, and after I thought I became more knowledgeable, she was still there whenever there were any questions.
Right. I guess I remember that there was a drawer in the desk that Mrs. French and I think maybe even Mrs. Jackson had, and for some of the fast readers and people that took out a lot of books, they would sometimes show a little, they'd say, I might have a new book you might like. You remember that?
And of course, I did the same thing.
You did. I know you did. And I was one of the lucky ones because sometimes the drawer opened. But anyhow, of course, the library, under the auspices of Iva Drew and some of her friends, was built in 1928. Prior to that, it had been in rooms, I guess, around the town. Is that kind of right? If I got that right, I wonder. So, after they built the new library, I always had the feeling that physical improvements, they didn't do much until you came in, Elmerline. I thought you kind of spurred everybody on.
Well, thank you very much. I tried, yes. We didn't have any money to speak of course, as we all know, but the lighting was terrible in the library. We had just dropped lighting, and we were open 11 hours a week, which was Tuesday afternoon, Friday afternoon, and evening, and Saturday afternoon. Well, Friday nights, trying to find a book with drop lights were very, very difficult.
Oh, it must have been brutal on your eyes.
And so, therefore, I did feel we needed some lights. So we had fluorescent lighting put in, which was the one big thing, our first big improvement.
That was your very, very first big, big improvement. Mm-hmm. Kind of excited about that.
Very.
And then you kept on going.
We decided to raise money by private subscription. And we started out with a donation of $1,000 from Lucy Stetzel. From there,
she was Iva Drew's daughter.
Yes, she was, and she was a very, very good friend of the library and to the library. Without her, we couldn't have done the things that we did do.
She took a real interest.
She took a great interest in the library.
Right.
And with this money that we raised, we painted the interior. We bought new stacks and had a new circulation disc made. Our floors sanded and even got hot water.
Well, it seems to me we're getting into the modern times here with hot water in the library. That must have been a help.
It was a big,
very big help. That circulation desk sounds mighty good to me too. You must have loved that. Must have been a big help to you, Elmerline.
Yes, it was. It was. We had just a small old knee-hole desk before, and the draft from the door every time the door opened was something, which is fun. Except back in those days, you didn't wear slacks to work; you wore a skirt or a dress.
Right.
And in the winter, it got a little drafty.
Now, who made that?
Lucian Carrier made
Lucian
the desk.
Carrier
Yes. We didn't have the money to buy a circulation desk, so I went through with the trustees, and I went through magazines and catalogs until we found what we thought we could use, and it worked out very, very, very well.
It had a spot right there for your typewriter and everything.
Spot, yeah.
So that
made a big difference, getting some of that off the desk.
Yeah, I can imagine it would.
And then Ethan Allen Corporation donated 3 round tables with the matching chairs for her. Before we had one long oak table, which was fine, except with the typewriter constantly on it, and a dictionary, and people trying to read a newspaper or magazine or something, and then the children trying to do their homework. It got rather confusing.
It had to be hard. It just had to be terrible.
We thought the 3 round tables would work better, and they really did seem to.
Well, you were going great guns, I think. What about the stacks and filing and books and things like that?
The stacks, we had just like as Frances said in her report, the stacks were old gun cabinets, gun boxes.
Is that right?
From the First World War, but they seemed to suffice actually, except for the fact when we had oversized books. They did fall out, or you put them in horizontally, or whatever you could do.
Right.
You just found the best way you could.
Don't you think someone used their imagination to get those gun boxes?
They certainly did.
It's a lot better than just a plank of wood. I think that was very imaginative.
It was. But we had 3 windows in the back of the library, which were lovely, looking out onto the river, as it were. But we needed the space so badly, we filled in the 3 windows with wooden cabinets.
Elmerline, we'll continue here with the physical improvements. Seems to me we must have been looking quite nice up there in the main room of the library. Hardwood floors? Did we have hardwood floors?
Yes, we had a beautiful hardwood floor, and Mrs. Stetzel did not ever want to have it covered with a rug. We spoke of having it done, but she was totally against it. So we just had it resanded instead, and had put a runner up through. Of course, it was difficult to keep in the winter with the salt, but it did make the library look lovely. It was very homey, and so that's why we kept the hardwood floor.
Well, I mean, she was so generous, it seemed like
we could really... the least we could do.
Yes.
It was the very least we could do.
Right.
And she was very insistent
that she wanted
that
those
she would like to have them kept.
Yes.
Them kept.
Well, then... here you were getting everything so nice in the library, and then what happened? Something bad happened.
Yes, the furnace blew out.
Oh, good heavens.
And there was oil all over everything, including the books and everything.
The books. Just a slick film all over everything.
Oil.
Isn't that awful? So then what happened then?
Well, we had Evelyn Dorman and her sister came in.
She was a good soul.
Scrubbed and they scrubbed and scrubbed.
Yes.
And got what they could, the best they could out. And 6 months later, the same thing happened.
Oh, hell. I can't believe
it. So, therefore, Mrs. Stetzel said, we do need a new furnace, and she put a new furnace in for us. A lovely furnace.
God. She was an
saved
angel.
Our lives.
Oh, she was an angel to us, I guess. Wow. And well, so then the children's library, I know you had your reference books in the center, and then the fiction going around the walls, and then the children's section was upstairs too.
The children's section was in the right-hand corner coming in, just a small round desk and shelves, kitty corner, and that was it.
That was
all
it
the
for the
space
kids.
We had for the children. Yes.
Well, that was tight quarters.
It was very. It was very. Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
I can't remember, Elmerline, whether we've gotten into the Dewey Decimal System business.
Well, no, I guess we haven't spoken about it yet. When I took over the library, probably Matt French, but also Edith Jackson had done a beautiful job of cross-referencing all the books in the library. All the cards were handwritten.
Handwritten. You think of the time,
You think of the time and the hours that were spent. But at that time, the Dewey Decimal System was a big thing, and it had to be done sometimes. So we decided that was the time to do it. With the help of the State Library and the trustees, including you, Ellie, who did many hours of typing and weeding, we did install the Dewey Decimal System.
And that was the very beginning of the Dewey Decimal System in the Colebrook Public Library.
Yes, it was. We started out by weeding the whole library. The State Librarian came up with books to show us how to do it and stayed with us and worked. And the trustees worked for days and days and days. We sold the books that were obsolete and to make room for the new books that we hopefully would be buying. And then in order to do the Dewey Decimal System, we had to have everything clean. In other words, everything had to be up to date.
Up to date.
We couldn't be cataloging and spending the hours and the time cataloging books that were obsolete.
Right.
And then you typed many hours, and other people did.
Yes.
And we did get it done. It was a tremendous job, but it got done.
Remember Marion Wells? Didn't she help us too?
Yes, she did.
Yeah, I remember her there. Huh?
Yes. I can't even remember half.
No, it was wonderful.
But we couldn't have done it because we couldn't afford to hire the help. At that time, there was only myself, the head librarian, or the librarian, or whatever, and one part-time helper. Well, you couldn't really accomplish much in 3 afternoons with just one librarian trying to keep the desk going. And
no, there's no way you could.
We had to depend on people like
the volunteers came in and helped, and of course, we got some good help from the state people too.
Very good help.
Advice about which books to read.
We did the very best job we could.
I don't think we threw out anything.
I hope not. I'm sure we probably did, but we hope not.
We'll never know. We'll never know. But so this must have given you more room in the library too.
This gave me much more space in the library. And at the time, of course, the bookmobile was a big thing. And it had started, and we wanted to naturally use it as much as possible. So every time it came, I would go out and choose a number of books I wanted, which were considerable at that time. And we would carry them in and restock the shelves, carry the ones I had borrowed before out, and that
was quite a job, though.
That was a big job. Yes, it was. Because we depended on we didn't have the money to buy the books, and we did depend on the book
to get
a great deal.
Yes,
to have a change of fiction, nonfiction, and children's books.
Right. No, it was a godsend. Just a godsend.
And at that time, the school library really had just begun, and they didn't have the collection any more than we did on a lot of things. And the children really used our library a great deal for their book reports, their science reports, and everything. So we did have to have a larger collection than we would probably need today with the wonderful school library that they do have now.
Both the grammar school and the high school made use of the library before they really got going on their library.
The teachers used to bring the lists over of their reports and ahead so that we would pull out what books we knew that were going to be needed.
Yeah. And so you kind of worked closely with the teachers.
We worked very closely with the teachers and with Joan Walsh when she became
very good relationship between the two, I would say. Well, then, of course, the bookmobile doesn't play the part that it did then because of the
interlibrary loans.
The interlibrary loans. And
now you can I assume now it just goes on a computer and you can just get any book back within a certain. Our library is not computerized yet, but it will be. But I mean, all they have to do is either pick up a phone or just, and tell them what they want, and they can get it from any library.
Any of the libraries in the system. Right. Do most of the libraries in the state belong to the system now?
You believe so? I'm sure they all do.
Because
you really would have to.
You're foolish not to.
You'd be foolish not to.
Well, then, I think you told me that you remembered that there used to be a lending library in Stickney's Pharmacy that kind of helped out a little bit.
Yes, and I don't exactly remember the years, but I'm sure but you do. I'm sure that they had it.
Well, I can't be sure, but I would think it would have been in the 60s.
Yes, and I don't know how many years they had it either.
No, I don't either.
But I know at least I remember myself borrowing some books that we just couldn't afford to get, that I'd go and take a book there and read it, And Yes, and it was a help to have it because we just didn't have the money to buy all the fiction that people wanted to read. And it was the majority of the books that went out were fiction at that time.
Yes. Well, dare I ask, did you have much criticism with your with your patrons? If you got a book that might have some language in it that people didn't?
Yes, I certainly did. As we know, the 60s was a time when everything was all free love. It was everything. And the authors realized this and were more than happy to cater to the public. So finally, I did have quite a few complaints. I simply, after one meeting in the state library, I decided to do what everyone else was doing. I posted a Freedom to Read Act up on the library and said, I'm sorry, I'll do the best I can. I was careful about what the high school students took out, but other than that, I just could not read and every book and be a judge. I just couldn't.
No, that's really censorship, to my way of thinking.
I couldn't censor all the books, and I felt that people had a right to read actually what they wanted to read. That's the way I felt.
Well, do you remember in particular, like a couple of books that people got
I remember Catcher in the Rye, and that was on a lot of the reading lists of the high school students, and the parents had a fit. But
just a fit.
It was, if the teachers said they could read it or should read it, they felt they could and should, and so I carried it, and that's what it amounted to. I did get complaints, but I felt if the parents wanted to censor what their children were reading,
that's their privilege. Yes,
that was their privilege.
Absolutely.
But I did try to be careful with the high school students as far as taking out any adult fiction, But I did feel that a person over 21 had more or less a right to read
what they would like,
they really like. It was a difficult time at the era at that time.
Yes,
we all know it was, and I did the best I could.
No, I think you did a very, very good job. I think Peyton Place, was that one of the other books?
Yes, that's one of the books I did not buy.
You didn't buy that one?
I did not buy. There was too much. No,
that was too.
That was. I don't know. I just didn't buy.
Didn't get that one. I wonder if we carry it now.
I have no idea.
That'd be fun to check. But
Today it's a whole new ball game, actually, with books. The writers write what they want to write, and
yes,
people read what they want to read.
Well, and we also have to say that we see a lot on television that's questionable too. So these are just changing times, to my way of thinking. Oh, I noticed here that I had made a little note during the bicentennial. We were very fortunate about that Colebrook Yesterday book that Richard Levitt compiled, and that the Farmers and Traders Bank sponsored, and the profits went to the library.
Yes, it did.
And for me, that was one of the nicest books.
It was.
I still go through it.
You worked very, very hard on that.
You did really, too.
No, I didn't work as hard as you did. You worked many, many, many hours on that.
But weren't people very good? When we get some pages to compile, then we would get on the telephone and call around people and say, could you come and help us put some pages together tonight? And they'd come, and
everybody had a very good time doing it.
It was fun.
It really was fun.
Yeah.
And we sold that from the library. I did while I was here, and
you also, because that was the bicentennial time, so did you sell the other goods too, Elmerline?
I sold bottles too, and that was it. But that was more or less at the end, what were left over after. I don't know who started selling the bottles, whether they sold them in stores like Dixon's or not. But we did have bottles that we sold, and we had the dish towels.
I think you're right about that. I think that then they got rid of them in the stores and brought them to you in the library.
Yes, and what was left, we tried to, we put them out on the shelves, tried to sell them. On top of the shelves, and tried to sell them.
Well, Elmerline, was that during the bicentennial when? Do I remember a picture of something being planted in the ground?
Yes, it was a time capsule planted in the ground during the bicentennial.
Out front?
Yes. Bob Moore was one of the ones that planted it.
Merle Wright. I think Merle Wright, Slackman. Do you know? Is that still?
John Dixon was there, I remember too, and I can't think who else. No, I really. I remember I went, and watched. But it was nothing really to do with us, other than the fact they wanted a place to put it.
Yes.
And you asked to use the library grounds, and Naturally, we said
Yes. Is it still there? I
I
wonder.
imagine it must be.
Well, I hope I'm around when they dig it up. I plan to be. uh, well, I also observed that the changing times and the role of the library has changed a great deal.
Yes. As visual aid, is that this what you mean?
Yes,
Visual
yes,
aids.
that's exactly what I mean. I couldn't come up with a word the way you did.
Yes. Visual aids, and it is altogether. It's a big thing now, and
it's a wonderful thing.
Wonderful. They have so many things, and I can remember when I was librarian, they wanted us to take on records, and I said that I'm very sorry, but we don't have the space, number one, and number two, we don't have the help to take care of records. And so I suppose maybe I missed a great opportunity, but to me, records and albums that went out or got broken at that time or scratched, and it would, to me, we just didn't.
No, I don't know where we would have put him, Elmerline. You were standing on your head as it was.
I don't know what we would have done. So that was one thing I often had thought, well, it was kind of too bad we weren't able to do it, but you can only, in a small area, do so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, the children's library, did that get downstairs?
Yes, that got downstairs eventually. I think that got downstairs during Mary Lynch's tenure.
And it moved downstairs, so that gave some more room.
Oh, yes, it must
upstairs.
have given well, it didn't give a great deal of room upstairs, but it did give that corner and those shelves in that corner. But it gave the children more space for their books.
Right.
This was the main thing. They used the whole room downstairs for a children's library. Therefore, they were able to buy more books and to take more books up the bookmobile and have a place for the children before I don't imagine they probably felt too welcome in one little corner.
No, it was kind of in the corner. Kids couldn't hang around.
And I tried and everything, but there was just no space for them really, only 4 chairs to sit at the table.
Right. I was thinking, someone else I think I'd like to mention was Leighton Cree. He was very generous to the library.
He left us money in a trust fund to be spent only for books.
Just for the books.
We didn't, and I thought that was good because books is what we needed. Books is what the library is.
It still is, to my way of thinking. The library is books, but as you say, visual aids and so on are very much.
I didn't mean that.
We very much a part of
visual aids at that time. But yes, so to me, I thought it was nice that.
It's very much, of course, all that so much into 1995. It's just unbelievable.
And I'm sure that years from now, people will laugh because everything will be computerized, and all our work on a Dewey Decimal System will be gone, I'm sure.
Well, but it served
its purpose in this day.
It served for quite a while. Of course, I understand the Dewey Decimal System, but I don't understand the computer business so much. So there you are. But, I think we've kind of covered quite a few things. Can you think of anything else, Elmerline, that you'd like to get in here? I'm going to click this off. We'll talk just a second. Well, Elmerline, it's true that we didn't have a very large children's area and that it did move downstairs. But I remember you having story hours and things like that for the kids.
Oh, we did everything that we could for the children. The little red wagon came periodically. I don't exactly remember how many times a year it came, but we had the little red wagon. And in the winter, we had our story hours down in the basement. And in the summer, we were able to have them out in the back lawn. And they seemed to enjoy them very much. They used to be Saturday afternoons.
And that was good fun.
That very much.
Well, did the teachers used to bring some of the kids down?
Oh, yes,
from the school, and they'd get their library card.
Yes, when they were in the 2nd grade, they would study in the community, of course. So they would study the police department, the library, and the fire station, and they would all come in groups, and they would get their library cards. And it was a big
I remember my boys were so thrilled when they got their own library card. And I bet you agree with me. If you can have a child start reading, they're probably going to read all their lives.
Certainly are. They certainly are.
And I think that was one thing I particularly appreciated about you when you were a librarian. You were a very ardent reader, and you always had good suggestions of books. You seemed to kind of learn or just knew. I don't know what kind of a book people would like, and you always seemed to come up with a good book. Well, you were very successful. More people have mentioned that you seem to have a knack for knowing what they'd like, you know.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you're surely welcome. Well, I think you did an awfully good job, Elmerline. Did you miss it after you left the
Oh,
library?
yes, I did. I missed the books very much.
The books, because you're a reader, I know.
Miss the books. I loved handling them. I loved reading them, and I still do.
And you still do.
Yes.
And you're working with Robert in the store.
And the reason I got done was because we bought the store, and I felt.
Is that right?
Yes.
And that was.
I probably would have still. No, I doubt it. But I.
Oh, you might have
stayed a little longer.
No, you never can tell. So you went down there, but I never see you walking on the street, Emily. You went bent over carrying an armload of books.
Usually I am. I still read. TV doesn't interest me. I read.
And I also think that probably some of those books go to Robert.
Oh, they sure do.
Because he reads about as much as you do. Though you don't like the same books.
No, not the same.
No, that's good.
Really.
That's very good.
I'm not into espionage too much.
I'm not either, Emily. Well, I think if you want to, I think the money that we had, we didn't have a lot of money, but I think you used it very wisely and very well. And when I stop and think, I was reading the Sentinel just today, Emily, and they're talking about the town budget. And I couldn't help but marvel when I saw that this year, the budget for the library they're asking for is $62,600. Isn't that amazing?
It's fabulous. As I remember, we were very fortunate when we got $3,000. And just before I left the library, I do believe it was around $4,100.
It had gone to $4,100. So there you are. But I also know I have bought books, and I know the book budget must be horrendous.
The cost of books is dreadful. Really and truly dreadful today.
It is. It really is.
What it was when I was library.
And of course, with this new edition, of course, I know that there are operating expenses and so on.
Oh yes. But it's a marvelous thing. It's
I think
a wonderful thing. We tried and tried so hard to get an addition to our library when I was librarian, and we did everything. And even Mrs. Stetzel offered to help us and everybody, but we could not seem to raise the money at that time. The town needed a new fire department, and it needed a new hospital, and those were the two top priorities, which I feel were the top priorities too.
I agree.
Therefore, we just could not do it, and I think getting the money they did for this new library wing is a wonderful thing.
It is. It really is. I'm all for it 100%.
And I wonder if the people in the town really realize it. I'm sure they do, but what a wonderful library and collection that they have.
I think for a small town, we are very, very fortunate. Very, very fortunate. And, well, it's of course the library is open a lot more hours too. I'm sure the circulation is up and the books are expensive and everything. But it's money. I think it's money well spent.
Oh, I
really do.
I certainly do.
Well, I've enjoyed this immensely.
Thank you.
And we had fun.
We covered what we could.
We did the best we knew how.
Okay.
Right. Bye-bye.
Oh dear.
Bring the fun of talking to Mary Lynch Jannenga on November 20th, 1995. Hi, Mary. We've been trying to get together here all summer.
Yes, it's hard to get together with busy schedules.
Well,
grandkids coming.
Hey, you're a busy person. I think you had a grandchild when I was talking to you the last time. But I particularly wanted to talk to you about the library.
Sure.
Well, anyhow, I can't remember when you went to work for the library.
Well, I think I started in probably 1970 part-time.
1970.
And then in February of 71, I became the librarian when Elmerline said that she was not going to be working anymore.
Right. But you worked there a little bit part-time.
I worked under Elmerline for a little over a year.
Over a year.
She taught me a lot.
Oh,
before she left, so I didn't go in cold by any means.
No. Well, how did you happen to get the job?
Well, I was taking my daughter, who was at the time about 2, to the library, and I used to do a lot of reading.
She's 2 years old.
2 years old. So she approached me one day and Elmerline approached me and asked me if I had ever considered a part-time job. At the time, I wasn't working, and I was a little interested in little bit of work. So checked with my mother to see if she could babysit, and off I went to a part-time job. I worked a couple of afternoons a week, and then from there, when Elmerline was going to be getting done, they asked me if I'd like to take over full time.
Great. When it was that 2-year-old, was that Tina or
That was
Helen?
Helen. Yeah, Tina
And she
wasn't born until after I was full time.
And then, oh my heavens! So then you had this 2-year-old, and then you went to work full time.
I went to work full time, but full time at that time was only 12 hours a week.
12 hours.
And at the time of my interview, actually, Richard Cross interviewed me for my full time position, and he asked me if I was thinking of having any more children. At the time, I didn't know, so I said, well, I might. And found out a couple weeks later that I was expecting Tina.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. So,
that's the way it goes.
But my mother was willing to babysit for both of them, so it was great. I still had the job, and only working 12 hours a week. It wasn't bad.
Well, I think I should say here for posterity, your mother was Helen
Davis.
Placey, and your dad was Gordon Placey. So you have good Colebrook roots here.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I have the feeling that I didn't know your mother that well, but I have the feeling she was a reader.
Yes, she was. Yeah. But she read, she did not like fiction. She read mostly nonfiction.
Nonfiction.
Yeah.
And they tell me, newspapers. She liked newspapers.
Newspapers and magazines.
Magazines and all that. Always reading. I always heard that about her. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Did you inherit that from her?
I certainly did, yeah.
Is that your interest to nonfiction?
Well, I think I liked fiction too, but I do like a lot of nonfiction.
Get carried away with that.
Yeah.
And your dad? Or doesn't he care
do too much reading, mostly just the papers.
Keeps up with the papers, yeah.
But I think it rubbed off on my girls too.
Your girls, both of the girls like to read. Little noses in the books.
Right.
And probably when they were little kids,
even when they were little.
Yeah, and you probably were reading to them.
Right.
What a time. So anyhow, so you ended up in Elmerline got done, and you took over her job. And how did it go?
Great. I really enjoyed working at the library. I attended the classes at UNH to become a full credited public librarian.
How long did you have to go?
It was, we had to take 8 classes and we took 2 a summer, so it was 4 summers. I went, Tina was 2 the first time that I went.
That had to be hard for you to get away.
Yes.
To go.
Mom kept the kids.
There again.
Yeah.
Good old mom.
Good old mom.
Good old mom
Right.
always, yeah.
And I remember them coming down to, we had a little graduation after our classes in Durham, and everybody coming down to my graduation.
Well, that's kind of satisfying in a way. You had accomplished something you felt really good about.
I didn't go to college, but I did have that degree.
And that was wonderful. Yeah. Would that be like a what kind of?
Well, it wasn't an actual college degree, but it did certify you to be a public librarian in any of the New England states.
Is that right?
There were other New England states that came and took the courses at their own UNH.
So if you were to go to another town, or back then, you could have gone right in and you would have been certified.
Right.
They would have accepted you.
That's
That's great. That must have been I would think, very satisfying. Well, anyhow, those little kids and you were reading and carrying on, but what do you remember particularly about working in the Colebrook Public Library?
Well, the people that came in were always so friendly and always looking for a good book. And,
love that part.
Yeah. They, and they would say, well, what's the good book on the shelf today? And you get to know what each person likes to read, so you could give them the newest book that came in, the kind of category they like.
Yeah, right. Well, don't tell me that you had that secret drawer that Emily and I were joshing about.
Of course I had the secret drawer. I had everything that Elmerline had and more.
Yeah. Because, it always seemed to me that made sense, because if you got a fast reader, they'd be back with it in about 4 days.
That's right.
And you give it to somebody that's going to take 2 weeks or 4 weeks to read it. It's a bestseller. Everybody wants it, So you got that from Emily.
We had
she told you.
Yeah,
she told you.
And then we had the waiting list.
Waiting list.
There were books that we hadn't even gotten in yet that had long waiting lists sometimes, and we'd only let people that were going to keep them 3 or 4 days maybe take them at first.
Well, Mary, Elmerline, certainly gave you full credit for the development of the children's room in the basement of the library. Now, that was the old library before the Shaw Ingram edition. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, you're right, Ellie.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah,
that was probably in about the middle of the time that I was there. I would say in maybe 1980, around that time.
Around 1980.
We had Frances Haynes working as just a part-time adult librarian, assisting me as an assistant. And we thought we would try to get a children's library going, and it sounded like the easiest way to do it would be to get some new shelves for upstairs and move those bullet boxes that you and Emily were talking about down.
Yeah, what were they, Mary? What they Remington?
I think they were
shell box something.
Somebody mentioned that there was the word Remington was on the ends of them, and we painted over those when we took them downstairs. They were old. They had been shellacked upstairs, so they looked like nice, and they were stacked about 10 high. They were almost to the ceiling, and Ethan Allen gave us the wood and helped us build new bookcases for the upstairs, for the outer walls of the upstairs.
Great.
And then we took all the bullet boxes apart, took them downstairs and painted them all different colors, each shelf was a different color, and put the children's room in what was the basement. And then we put Frances Haynes as children's librarian and added hours. She was the first children's librarian.
Very first children's librarian.
Right. Yes. We opened the library more hours shortly after that. We were open, by the time I left, we were open over 20 hours a week.
What would that be like? I was trying to figure how that would be. Tuesday.
I think it was. I think it was about. We were open every day.
Every day.
By the time I left.
Yeah.
Most afternoons was 3 hours, and then there were some days that we were 4 or 5 hours.
Were you open any night?
We were open one night.
One night.
Right. Yeah. Usually Friday night.
Friday
shopping night.
And so that was how it was. And so then Frances became full-time.
Frances was full-time children's librarian, and the children's library was open as long as the adult library was, so that even the little kids could come in before school opened.
Well, did you find this made quite a difference?
It made a big difference. It was a lot more room for the children downstairs. It didn't add that much space for the adults. The children's library, as Elmerline said, was kind of in a little tiny corner.
It was. There was just that one little table, all those little kids,
right. We had, before we even moved downstairs, we had gotten a grant to do educational toys and games, which we really didn't have the space for, but I kind of crammed into that corner. I don't know if you remember, we had a puppet display.
Yes, I do remember that.
We had several puppets that the children could take out, just like a book, and we had educational puzzles and educational toys. And those, when we moved downstairs, plus it gave a lot more room, and the kids could even come in and play with games and toys.
Which was really a new concept for the library, wasn't it?
It was. One of the other things that we had done was a grant that we did with Lancaster and Groveton. Lancaster was actually the writer of the grant. And they wrote a grant to get sculptures and paintings.
Mm-hmm.
There were several times that New York Graphics salesmen would come up and visit the co-op. We called it a co-op, library co-op. And we had money for 2 or 3 different years and bought different sculptures and large paintings, famous paintings that people could also take out. So the library was getting into more than just books.
It was kind of the beginning, wasn't it? And of course, it's just
grown
mushroomed.
since then. Yeah.
You know, I mean, we used to think just books, but
Right.
then this was the beginning of another whole concept of the library. And it must have brought you more patrons and more kids.
Well, a lot of different types of patrons. You had people that were coming not just for a book, but they were coming because they were going to have a party and wanted a famous painting on their wall.
Is that right?
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they would come and get. Paul Nugent used to like to come and get different painting, and he'd put a different painting over his couch each month because you let the paintings out for longer periods of time, and he would come back and he would swap paintings, and then I would go to Lancaster and get a different one and put a different one on his wall.
Well, see, that got completely away from me. I didn't even know it was available. I wish I would have known. I would have done the same thing.
Right.
It seems like a wonderful thing.
We had some really nice New York graphic sculptures. We had cats and dogs and Hindu and Voodoo.
See, I had my nose in a book and I didn't look around and see what else was available, and all these other things definitely were available, and thanks, to you. I mean, but I think you must have found that fun.
It was a lot of fun. And it was a lot of fun to get to know the other librarians and to share experiences with them, and to share problems with them and try to solve problems together.
Yeah. No, I can see that would be. That's very interesting. I was going to say, so then the children moved down upstairs, and were you the one? I remember going in the library and there were new displays like paperbacks and teddy bears and things like. Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Yeah, okay.
We used to try to.
There was
quite a while that I would do a display a month. And
yes.
It would be of a different theme each month.
Yeah.
We might be
displaying
paperbacks. The teddy bear one probably was because my daughter collected teddy bears. A lot of them were hers.
I can picture.
And then we did dolls of different countries and a lot of different collectible things.
Now, see, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember from the conventions.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. Well, at this time, was the bookmobile still coming up, or had they stopped?
No, the bookmobile was still coming. John Wright would come.
Nice man.
Oh, wonderful
nice man.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
He was so dedicated to
Yeah.
that, and he knew what kinds of books my patrons wanted, and he would pick those off his shelves in Twin Mountain and make sure that I had the ones my patrons would like.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, and he always liked to have the kids come on the bookmobile and help me pick out the books. So my children would come with me, and they'd pick out the children's books while I picked out the adult books. Yeah.
That worked out well.
That worked out well. Yeah.
And the kids loved it. Help mom.
Yeah,
help mom pick out her books. And they pick out theirs.
Right. Yeah. And they started getting into the collections with the toys and the games too. So there were things that you could get from the bookmobile like that.
Yeah. That's great. I think, but you hadn't really got into that visual aid situation, like.
We didn't. The only thing we did with visual aids is you could get movies, but they were for the use of the library. So I could get a movie from the Concord office and show it as a program. We did that a lot. We did children's programs with the children's movies, and we showed 2 or 3 movies, short 20-minute or so movies, and then we read them some stories. There also were adult ones, especially the classics that we could get. There were nature films that we could get, and for a long time we did cooperative things, borrowing like that too. It was hard. There was no place actually in the library where we could do it. So
not like today.
No, not like today though.
Because today you could go down in the basement,
right?
All kinds of office.
We used to go to the bank. There was the room under the bank.
And you could go over there?
We could go over there and because that one room was separate from the rest of the bank. Yeah. So we could have public meetings there.
Isn't that great? Nobody was going to rob the bank.
I don't think so.
No, I mean, you could go in there because it was separate,
Right.
No, I didn't know that.
And we worked a lot. There was a while that Stewartstown was trying to get their library together, and they did a lot of the classic movies, and we would borrow them and show them up in Stewartstown.
I have no conception of what's happening in Stewartstown today.
No, I don't even know what their libraries are like.
No, I don't either. Unfortunately, I should probably look into that. But, for so long I didn't have a true library, But I think they've come along.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of cooperative things, actually from Lancaster north all the way to Pittsburgh. The libraries would try to get together. We try to meet once a month.
Is that
and
right?
Talk about different books, and a lot of times we would order books that were not the same ones that another library was ordering, and then we would borrow back and forth for our patrons too, which saved us all money.
And there was a lot of cooperation.
Between
you all.
And a lot that we had the school librarians were in with us too. Kanan was
part
also
of
with
you
us.
too? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know Elmerline did mention the school library had just gotten going about the time, but then the school library just kept getting stronger.
Well, the school libraries, I think, because of the schools having such strict regulations, they needed. That was one of the things that they needed to become an accredited school was good libraries.
Yeah.
And so we didn't buy quite as many children's books after the children's libraries and the schools got going. But then they wanted things to read in the summer too, so we had to make sure we still had them.
Right. But always good harmony between the school library and the town library. Work well together. That's
really
always, I always felt that. Definitely. Elmerline mentioned having problems with some of the material that the public library offered. Maybe by the time you got going, people calmed down and they weren't quite so nervous about what people were reading, or did you still get some problems?
I think a lot of the problems that we got, we had the freedom to read
Act or whatever it was.
Just like Elmerline did.
Yeah.
But, so I didn't have too many problems with adults, but some of the ones that we were having problems with were, like Elmerline was talking about, The Catcher in the Rye, the children's books. And I remember when I was in summer school and taking the children's lit course, one of the books that they were talking about was a little children's book. It was called A Rabbit's Wedding.
No,
it was about a black rabbit and a white rabbit.
Oh my Lord. Very.
And it was at the time of a lot of the segregation.
A lot of discussion about what to do about it.
It had been taken off the shelves. It had been banned in the South. And the discussion that we were having was whether New England was going to ban it or not. It was always on my shelf because I loved that story. It was just a beautiful story of a little white rabbit and a little black rabbit.
Did like Concord tell you maybe you should take it off, or
no? Actually, Concord was standing behind us, saying that because of the types of communities that we had, we probably were okay with it.
Isn't that interesting? I wonder if they still got that book in the library.
I don't know.
It'd be fun to know.
It would be fun to know.
Whether it's
because
you loved it.
It
was a good book.
It was a very good book. No connotations at all, except that it was a black and a white rabbit. And then the other things that we were getting were the Judy Blume books, which were the books for young teenage girls.
Yes.
Discussing puberty and drugs and that kind of thing, and those were the ones that
some parents
did not want their children reading.
Yeah.
I think I was a very liberal parent. I was willing to let my girls read those, and I can't say that it hurt them any. So.
Well, hey, you were right, because the Judy Blume books have just kept going.
That's
and
right.
Going.
Yeah.
I mean, you were heady, anything. Well, don't you think the addition to the library is wonderful?
That was my dream.
That was your dream.
That was my dream. I wanted that addition just as Elmerline did.
Oh,
and
couldn't we?
There was no way that we could come up with the money to do it.
We never could have.
No.
If it wouldn't have come about the way it did.
Right.
And thanks to Robert Shaw and Russell Ingram and the Masons and that whole conglomerate. I don't understand how it all was, and I don't need to know, but it was all through that deal.
It's great, and the Masons and the Eastern Star also got the meeting room out of it.
Yeah.
And they have a beautiful meeting room now too.
So didn't it work well?
It worked very well.
And it was always your dream.
It was my dream to have an addition.
Yeah.
In fact, I had been told when I was librarian that the actual library was designed to be the entrance to a large library, which we now have.
It's wonderful, it really is. And I also think it's very interesting, Mary, that let me see, that would be your first cousin, isn't it? It's librarian now, am I wrong? Julie?
Julie is my cousin, right?
Is she your first
Yes,
cousin?
she
She is your mother's brother's daughter. Yeah,
right.
so you guys are first cousins. So that's kind of interesting the way,
That it
it's
worked.
worked
Right.
out.
I had several high school students that worked for me part-time while I was librarian, and a couple of my nieces and one of my cousins worked for me
Is
throughout
that
the
right?
years.
Yeah. Now, Julie never.
No, Julie's a little bit younger.
So she wouldn't have got in there. Yeah, at that time. But it's all kind of, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, I think we're very fortunate in our library. That bookmobile no longer comes.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Don't think they have a bookmobile anymore.
I don't either. Then that interlibrary loan, that's just an accepted thing, isn't it now?
Interlibrary loan is just something every library does.
Does now.
Yeah.
And censorship, visual aids, children's room. What else you got there on your list that we ought to hit?
Let's see. One of the things that we did do was finally get the budget increased with books, for books. So we did buy a lot of nonfiction. There were not an awful lot of nonfiction available when I first started working.
I don't think so.
I did a lot of things in the arts and crafts.
Right.
And gardening.
You kind of the emphasis on this for this
On those
extra
things,
money.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
History is history, and a lot of the history books were there, but the science books, the arts and crafts, a lot of those were outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And we gradually increased those a lot.
Well, I know our budget is a lot, but hey, it's got to be a lot.
Well, books are expensive. Books
You
are
can't
very
buy
expensive.
any, especially in nonfiction
That's
books.
right.
But I always think nonfiction, you'll never go out of style.
No.
It's not like fiction. You buy fiction, and then a few years
and
down
it's
the
gone.
road,
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
The only thing with the science and the medical, that kind of thing, you have to keep replacing. Those change so fast.
And especially nowadays.
Yeah.
I think. Hey, I know I don't have to tell you this is what you really do nowadays. You've been so involved in the ambulance corps and teaching courses, and so I mean I've got to you
Now
know
my
more
husband
about
and I are both EMT instructors, and we teach together all the time.
and you love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely love that. Was there anything else there we ought to get in here?
The only other thing I had thought of was one of the exciting things that happened while I was librarian was the Wilder episode.
Oh, for Pete's sakes!
Right across the street.
Hey, great!
At my uncle's garage, actually.
Absolutely!
Yeah.
Yeah, was the library open?
The library was not
That's
open
so
at the
good,
time
you're
it
proud of
happened.
it.
Well, I was working part-time at the hospital as
When
a
this
dispatcher
occurred,
at the same time. And I was at the hospital and dispatched the ambulance to come down and get Chuck Jellison, who was the state police that had been shot at the same time as Wilder. And then
And you were right up there.
I was at the hospital when they came down. And then I came to the library as the rest of my afternoon job, and because of my confidentiality issue with the hospital, the phones rang all afternoon and I couldn't say a word. because I would be breaching confidentiality. So I had to hand the phone to Frances.
Oh my heavens! I've never heard this.
Yeah. Oh, she got to do interviews on all kinds of stations from all over the world. We're calling the library as the central place to call in a town.
Is this?
And I would say, yes, let me give you to my assistant, and I would give Frances the phone, and she would say, as a matter of fact, it happened right across the street.
And here you were, and you
I
really
say
knew,
right.
and you knew, and here you were,
Right.
I couldn't say.
Right.
No, I didn't know that. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
And my uncle, it was in my Uncle Vic's garage.
Absolutely.
And he was gone.
And he was away. And what was the name of the guy that was on the TV there? You know,
Wayne DeLong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. We've got a tape of that. You know, he's so kind of, where he says, wow,
My uncle was eating at a restaurant and mentioned that he was from Colebrook, and the person at the restaurant said, "Oh, something happened there today." And we're telling him about it, and he said, "That was at my service station."
No, is that
Yeah.
right? I am so glad. We're talking about having historical this winter. I think we're going to title it "Where Were You When a Wilder Got Shot?" So I hope that you would come. Because there'd be. Everybody's got a story, and they all want to tell you just where they were, what they were doing. But hey, that's great. Yeah. No, I didn't know that. And here you were, you couldn't say anything.
Right.
And Frances, she
had her name in all kinds of papers.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, all over the world.
Frances,
yeah. She was interviewed by phone for several different TV stations.
That's crazy. Yeah. I learned something. But anyhow, you know.
Yeah, I knew.
You know, but you couldn't say.
I couldn't say words.
No, that's crazy. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Believe me. I think you did a heck of a job down there, and I must confess that I have learned quite a bit. You did. I didn't know you did, because there weren't things. I go and I get a book out for myself to read, and I have little idea what else is going on.
Right.
And I also thought you did a good job, but I wasn't really aware of all this that you told me about. Very interesting, and I did know that you were responsible for the children's room. Now that furnace used to be down there. What you do with that furnace in the basement? We go down those stairs.
Yeah, the furnace room is still there. We put a door, and then being down there, we had to put an outside entrance.
Yes, you had.
So we put another entrance on the back. But the furnace room is still down there as a separate room.
Is it? But it doesn't do anything anymore.
Doesn't interfere with it.
No, they don't. The furnace does. The furnace still?
Furnace is still there. Yeah.
Does it work? Do they still pump heat?
Yes. Yeah.
Up to the old part
of the other building. Well, now I don't know with the new addition whether they moved that. They must have moved the furnace room to a different place.
Well, I haven't been poking around
down there to look.
No.
Well,
I could go and I
check furnace rooms out.
And I go and I wouldn't know anymore after
Right.
I went. Well, this has been great to talk to you, Mary. And so you were actually at the library how many years?
I was there 14 years.
I don't believe it. 14 years.
I went full time at the Balsams in May of 1985.
That's something. No, so you, Elmerline, she said earlier on the tape, what was she there? Like 9 years, and you were 14. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. Then that's something. No, I had no idea. Well, you weren't there, Mary, as long as Arthur French.
No, that's right.
And who's the other one before that? We haven't had that many librarians, because those early gals, they went and they stayed.
They were there, right?
For a long time. But hey, how long was Frances?
Frances, well, she was librarian. She was children's librarian a few years before I left, and she just retired last year.
Yeah.
So, probably 10 or more than 10 years.
Well, generally when we get to this, we say, well, time flies when you're having fun. I guess that's what people say. I don't know. But
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was great when the kids were little because they had a place that they could go right after school. They could come over and stay with me. I didn't need a babysitter.
Yeah, no. Hey, worked out
all the kids.
Yeah.
"22nd, 1995. I am
Kind of thought maybe we were about done, but you said a couple more things, and I really wanted to get them on tape if they don't mind at that time. We were talking about the cooperation between Colebrook and the other towns.
We had a lot of cooperation. All the other towns right here in this area, Stewartstown and Pittsburgh and North Stratford, have really, really small libraries. And Colebrook, being a larger library, was trying to help them out, and it became kind of a cooperative thing that they could borrow books from us for their patrons. And then we also worked with the school libraries, and usually for quite a while we held monthly meetings, and all librarians would get together and discuss issues.
Yeah, with various problems.
And,
so
talk about problems and
yeah.
solutions to them.
Right.
And one of the things that I always wanted to do was put Colebrook on the map. I wanted people to know that Colebrook existed, that north of Franconia Notch was not the end of New Hampshire.
Bless your heart. We need that, I tell you.
I was I was chairman of the Northern District of Libraries for quite a long time, and one of the things that the chairman would do we would go to monthly meetings in Concord and meet with the other chairmen and with the state librarian and other officials, and they got to realize that Colebrook and north of the Notch did exist.
Well, they need reminding. I agree with you on that. But you made your spot, you know. They knew.
Yeah, they knew we were here, and they started to recognize that maybe we should start to hold some of those meetings that were supposed to be state meetings a little bit further north, so that some of us could get there without having to travel for half a day.
And they would do that.
And they did.
Tried.
They
made
tried.
An effort.
Yeah,
made an
they
effort.
tried.
Yeah.
We did get some things moved up as far as Plymouth, and maybe even a few up into Littleton once in a while. Not too often did they come all the way to Colebrook or Lancaster, but once in a while they did.
You can't expect the world, Mary. You know
That's
that.
Right.
You know, we can't. But, you know, if they get up to Lancaster, you know, that's hell. Yeah. Well, it just seems to me that, you know, when Elmerline was talking about hers, and then you just carried the ball, and time went on, and new approaches, and you were the guy that was there, and this was the beginning of the new. And hey, like we were talking about, we haven't got the computer in the Colebrook Library yet.
Right. I think that's something that's coming, and something that's needed.
Oh, it is. I hate to say, I wouldn't be surprised 2 years from today if we had it. We do need it.
It would be good.
You know, great. Yeah.
And when we get online, and then you can call the computer at the library and find out if the book you want's in, so you don't have to bother to walk down and get it unless it's there.
Isn't that something? The whole deal. And so, you know, I'm much older than you, but you know, it's such a different whole. Well, my goodness, Matt French and these Edith Jackson, they just wouldn't believe.
I think they'd be really glad at what's happened in the library, but
I think they'd
probably
be
would not believe it could happen.
No, but I think, you know, they both were, I think people, generally speaking, who work in libraries, kind of foresighted and, you know, looking forward to this kind of, it's like an adventure.
Sure
in
is.
a sense. That's what, and I think that's what the library is all about. Well, hey, is there anything else we should hit? Now is the hour.
We've covered quite a bit of territory.
Yeah, but I've enjoyed it just immensely.
I've enjoyed being here too.
It's, you know, I love this, and I love the library, and I guess I should say, library has never been turned down by the town of Colebrook. Colebrook, you know, the library asks, and the town always supports.
That's right.
and I've never seen it fail. Sometimes we worried. I remember worrying, as a trustee, we're going to ask too much. Town never turned ever money away.
Well, all the trustees were taxpayers too, and they didn't ask for more than what they thought the town could do.
It's a good way to spend money. You get something
Yes.
back.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, I just enjoyed this immensely, and I hope when your time gets freer that, maybe you can join us in doing some interviewing, this kind of stuff, this old historical stuff.
I'd like to join the Historical Society and be
We'd love
active
to
when
have you. Well, I know you can't be everywhere at once. I haven't found out you can do that yet. Absolutely great. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
Loved it.